300 feet beneath the Philippine Sea, an autonomous underwater vehicle captures something that makes the entire research team freeze. A submarine, perfectly intact, sits upright on the seafloor as if waiting. The conning tower still bears faded markings. The deck gun remains in position. When the cameras push closer to peer through the corroded hull plating, they reveal something no one expected to find after 80 years. This is not just another war grave. What lies inside this steel tomb rewrites everything we thought we understood about the final days of World War II in the Pacific. The discovery. The research vessel Ocean Seeker had been searching for 3 weeks when the sonar operator called out coordinates that stopped all conversation on the bridge. June 2024, roughly 120 miles northeast of the Philippine island of Luzon. The bottom profiling system had just painted a shape that could only be one thing: a submarine. The autonomous underwater vehicle descended through water so clear the cameras could track its progress for nearly 50 feet before the darkness swallowed it completely. At 280 feet, the floodlights activated. And there, rising from the sand and silt like a monument, sat a Balao-class fleet submarine of the United States Navy. She rested upright, her keel settled into the sediment, her pressure hull largely intact despite 8 decades underwater. The conning tower stood tall, its periscope shears still in place. The forward deck gun remained mounted, its barrel angled slightly downward as if taking aim at something on the ocean floor, and painted on the conning tower, barely visible beneath layers of marine growth and corrosion, were the numbers that identified her. USS Robalo, SS-273. The historians on the expedition knew the name immediately. Robalo had been declared lost with all hands on July 26, 1944. 80 years almost to the day. She had departed Fremantle, Australia on her 3rd war patrol, heading for the South China Sea with orders to interdict Japanese shipping lanes. The official record stated she struck a mine off the coast of Palawan. 4 survivors reached shore and were captured by Japanese forces. None of them made it home. The submarine herself had never been found. Until now. What made the discovery extraordinary was her condition. Most submarines lost in combat show catastrophic damage. Broken hulls, missing sections, debris fields scattered across the seabed. Robalo appeared almost pristine. Her hull plating showed the expected corrosion, but the structural integrity was remarkable. The stern planes were still extended. The rudder was centered. She looked like she had simply settled to the bottom and stopped, as if her crew had parked her there and walked away. The ROV circled the wreck for 2 hours, documenting every visible surface. The cameras captured hull numbers, equipment details, and damage patterns. Researchers noted several hull penetrations that appeared consistent with mine detonation, but something else caught their attention. The forward torpedo room hatches showed signs of deliberate opening. Not explosive damage, not corrosion failure. Someone had opened those hatches from inside. The expedition leader, Dr. Sarah Chen, had spent 15 years searching for lost submarines of World War II. She had located wrecks in the Java Sea, the Coral Sea, and the waters off the Philippines. She understood what combat damage looked like. She understood what time and salt water did to steel. But the pattern of damage on Robalo did not fit the accepted narrative. The mine strike theory required re-examination. Because if this submarine had been mortally wounded by a mine, her crew would not have had time to open internal hatches and attempt to abandon ship in an organized fashion. Mine explosions killed submarines in seconds, not minutes. The men aboard had no warning, no chance to react. Yet the evidence suggested otherwise. The ROV positioned itself near the forward torpedo loading hatch. The camera zoomed in on the mechanism. The dogs that secured the hatch were rotated to the open position. The hatch itself had been pushed outward, now hanging at an angle where corrosion had weakened the hinges. This was not blast damage. This was intentional. Dr. Chen authorized the ROV to attempt entry. The vehicle maneuvered carefully, its manipulator arms extending to widen the gap in the hatch. The cameras pushed through into darkness that had been sealed since 1944. And what the lights revealed inside the forward torpedo room made everyone aboard the research vessel go silent. The room was not empty. The submarine and her mission. To understand what Robalo was doing in these waters, you have to go back to the desperate summer of 1944, when the United States Navy was tightening its stranglehold on Japan's maritime lifelines. Robalo was a Balao-class fleet submarine, 311 feet long, displacing 2,400 tons, submerged. She carried a crew of 80 men, 10 torpedo tubes, 6 forward and 4 aft, and enough fuel to patrol for 75 days without resupply. Built at the Manitowoc Shipbuilding Company in Wisconsin, she was launched in May 1943 and commissioned 4 months later. Her first 2 war patrols had been successful. She sank a Japanese tanker off Indochina. She damaged a cargo ship in the Taiwan Strait. She performed reconnaissance missions along occupied coastlines. By the standards of submarine warfare in the Pacific, she was an effective boat with a competent crew. Her commanding officer was Commander Manning Kimmel, a submarine veteran with years of experience in the Pacific theater. His executive officer, Lieutenant Samuel Tucker, had come up through the submarine service and was considered one of the finest navigators in the fleet. The crew was a mix of veterans and newer sailors, but they had trained together and fought together. They trusted their boat, and they trusted each other. On June 22, 1944, Robalo departed Fremantle on her 3rd patrol. Her orders directed her to proceed northeast through the Makassar Strait, then west through the Sulu Sea toward the South China Sea. She was assigned a patrol area off the western coast of Palawan Island, a region where Japanese convoys moved supplies and reinforcements between the Philippines and Southeast Asia. The mission was straightforward: find enemy ships, sink them, avoid detection, come home. What the official orders did not mention was a secondary assignment. Robalo was carrying something beyond her standard loadout of torpedoes and ammunition. Documents recovered from naval archives decades later revealed that certain submarines on patrol in the Philippines were occasionally tasked with intelligence-gathering missions. They would meet with coast watchers, Filipino resistance fighters, or Allied intelligence operatives operating behind Japanese lines. They would deliver supplies, extract personnel, or retrieve documents that could not be transmitted by radio. Robalo made contact with another submarine, USS Flounder, on July 2nd. The radio exchange was brief. Robalo reported her position and stated she was proceeding to her patrol area. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. That was the last confirmed communication. On July 26th, a radio intercept station in Australia picked up a fragmentary transmission on Robalo's frequency. The message was garbled and incomplete, but it mentioned an explosion and gave a position roughly 20 miles off the coast of Palawan. Search aircraft were dispatched, but they found nothing. The Navy waited. Weeks passed with no further contact. In September, after Robalo had been overdue for more than a month, the War Department officially declared her lost. The presumed cause was listed as enemy action, most likely a mine. Japanese minefields were known to exist off Palawan. The area was heavily defended, and submarines operating there faced significant danger. 4 survivors eventually confirmed the mine theory. Or so the story went. Samuel Lazar Tucker, Floyd Laughlin, Wallace Martin, and Teodoro Lona reached the coast of Palawan after Robalo went down. They were captured by Japanese forces and imprisoned. According to Japanese records, all 4 men died in captivity before the war ended. Their testimony, if any was recorded, never reached American intelligence. For 80 years, the mine explanation stood unchallenged. Robalo struck an underwater mine, flooded rapidly, and sank with most of her crew still aboard. The 4 men who escaped were unlucky enough to be captured. Tragic, but not uncommon. Dozens of submarines were lost in similar circumstances. Case closed. Except the wreck told a different story. And what the cameras found inside the forward torpedo room suggested Robalo's final mission was not what the Navy had officially recorded. What the cameras found: the remotely operated vehicle, known as the ROV, pushed through the corroded hatch and entered a space that had been sealed from the world since July 1944. The forward torpedo room of a fleet submarine is a cramped, utilitarian space. Racks for 24 torpedoes line the bulkheads. Bunks fold down between the racks, where off-duty crew sleep surrounded by tons of high explosives. The loading mechanisms dominate the forward end, steel arms and chain hoists designed to maneuver 2-ton weapons into the tubes. The cameras panned across the room, and immediately the researchers realized something was wrong. The torpedo racks were not fully loaded. Standard procedure called for submarines to depart on patrol with every available torpedo aboard. Robalo should have carried 24 Mark 14 torpedoes in her storage racks. The cameras counted only 16. Where were the other 8? The ROV moved deeper into the compartment. The bunks hung empty, their canvas torn and rotted. Personal effects floated in the gentle current created by the vehicle's thrusters. A wallet drifted past the camera. Photographs, their images long since dissolved, tumbled through the water. A pair of boots sat on the deck plates, laces still tied, as if someone had stepped out of them and simply vanished. Then, the lights found something that did not belong. Secured to the deck in the space where the torpedo racks should have been were 8 wooden crates, each roughly 4 feet long, 2 feet wide, and 2 feet deep. Heavy-duty steel banding held them in place. Stenciled markings on the wood were barely legible, but the cameras captured enough detail for later analysis. The crates were labeled with codes that matched nothing in standard Navy supply nomenclature, but researchers who examined the footage recognized the format. These were intelligence service markings, the kind used by the Office of Strategic Services, the wartime predecessor to the CIA. The ROV's manipulator arm reached out and tested one of the crates. The wood had degraded significantly, but the steel banding held. With careful pressure, the arm pulled at the crate's lid. The wood cracked, then gave way, and inside, wrapped in layers of oilcloth and sealed in what appeared to be rubberized containers, were documents. Hundreds of them. The cameras zoomed in as the ROV carefully extracted one of the sealed containers. The rubber had held for 80 years. When researchers eventually brought this material to the surface and opened it in a controlled environment, they found maps, code books, personnel rosters, and operational plans. All of it in Japanese. These were not random papers. These were intelligence materials of extraordinary value. Maps showing Japanese defensive positions throughout the Philippines. Code books used by Japanese naval forces in the South China Sea. Rosters identifying officers and units stationed across the occupied territories. Operational plans for defensive strategies Japan intended to implement in the event of an American invasion. Every document was dated between May and July 1944. Every document was stamped with Japanese military seals indicating high classification, and every document represented intelligence that Allied forces should not have possessed. But there was more. In the second crate, the cameras found something else. Small metal canisters, roughly the size of a coffee can, sealed with threaded lids and coated in a protective wax. When these were eventually recovered and opened, they contained undeveloped photographic film, hundreds of frames. And when that film was carefully developed using techniques designed for severely degraded materials, the images showed Japanese military installations, harbor facilities, airfields, and fortifications. These were reconnaissance photographs taken from ground level, not aerial surveillance. Someone had been inside Japanese-controlled territory with a camera, documenting targets for future military operations. The third discovery was perhaps the most disturbing. In the aft section of the torpedo room, tucked behind the remaining torpedoes, the remotely operated vehicle found personal effects that did not match standard Navy issue. Civilian clothing, identity papers with Filipino names, currency from multiple countries, A leather satchel contained what researchers later identified as gold coins, Portuguese escudos. Each coin dated 1938 or earlier. These were the tools of espionage, the materials intelligence operatives would carry to blend into occupied territories, to bribe informants, to purchase information. This was not standard submarine equipment. This was a spy's toolkit, and it was still aboard the submarine. The implication was inescapable. Robalo had been scheduled to deliver these materials or extract the personnel who carried them. The mission had gone wrong. Whatever happened to this submarine happened before she could complete her intelligence assignment. The cargo that should have been delivered to the Philippine resistance was still aboard. The operatives who should have been extracted were nowhere to be found. The cameras continued documenting the interior. In the crew quarters, personal effects remained scattered where they had fallen when the submarine went down. In the control room, the depth gauges were frozen at 280 feet. In the engine room, the diesel engines sat cold and silent, their control levers still set to the positions they occupied in the submarine's final moments. But it was the forward escape trunk that revealed the most haunting detail. The trunk was designed to allow crew members to exit a sunken submarine by flooding a small chamber and swimming to the surface. The hatch at the top of the trunk was open. The chamber itself showed evidence of use. Someone had attempted to escape. The remotely operated vehicle positioned its cameras to look up through the open hatch into the water column above. There, preserved in the sediment just outside the submarine, researchers would later find human remains. Not inside the submarine, where most of the crew likely died when she flooded. Outside, scattered across the seabed in a pattern suggesting men who had reached the surface only to drown before they could reach shore. The survivors mentioned in the official report may have been the only ones who made it far enough to be captured. But the evidence suggested others had tried, and the presence of unopened life rafts still secured to the deck implied the disaster happened too quickly for proper abandoned ship procedures. Something had gone catastrophically wrong, but it was not a mine. The evidence that changes everything. When Dr. Chen's team returned to port and began analyzing the evidence recovered from Robalo, the picture that emerged contradicted nearly every element of the official story. The hull damage told the first part of the truth. Naval architects who examined the high-resolution scans identified 5 separate penetrations in the pressure hull. 3 were clustered near the forward ballast tanks. 2 were further aft, near the engine room. The pattern did not match mine detonation. Mines create massive, catastrophic breaches, single points of failure that rip submarines apart. The damage on Robalo was different. Multiple smaller penetrations. Deliberate, targeted. These were torpedo strikes, or more accurately, these were depth charge detonations at close range. The Japanese Navy in 1944 used Type 95 depth charges dropped from destroyers and patrol craft. The weapon was designed to detonate at preset depths, creating a shockwave that could crush a submarine's hull. A single charge might not sink a boat immediately, but multiple charges in close succession would overwhelm the pressure hull and flood the vessel. Robalo had been attacked, not by a mine, by a Japanese warship. The question was why the official record listed a mine as the cause. The answer lay in the classified documents that were finally declassified in 2023. Naval intelligence files from 1944 revealed that Robalo's mission was part of a broader operation code named Coral Garden. Multiple submarines were assigned to support intelligence gathering efforts in the Philippines ahead of the planned invasion. They would deliver supplies to resistance forces, extract Allied operatives who had been working behind enemy lines, and retrieve captured documents that could inform invasion planning. Robalo was supposed to rendezvous with a Filipino resistance cell operating on the west coast of Palawan. The cell had obtained a trove of Japanese military documents through an inside source, a Filipino civilian who worked as a translator for the Japanese occupation forces. The documents detailed defensive plans, troop positions, and logistical capabilities throughout the Philippines. This intelligence was considered critical to General MacArthur's planned return to the islands. The rendezvous was scheduled for July 24, 1944. Robalo was to surface off the coast under cover of darkness, take aboard the resistance operatives and their documents, and then proceed to a safer location to radio a confirmation before continuing her patrol. What naval intelligence did not know was that the Japanese had discovered the resistance cell. The Filipino translator had been identified and arrested. Under interrogation, he revealed the planned submarine rendezvous. Japanese forces prepared an ambush. When Robalo surfaced at the designated coordinates on the night of July 24th, she was met not by friendly contacts, but by a Japanese destroyer lying in wait. The destroyer, later identified as Kuretake, opened fire with deck guns and dropped depth charges as Robalo attempted to crash dive. The submarine took multiple hits before she could submerge. The depth charges followed her down, detonating close enough to rupture the hull in several locations. Flooding was immediate and catastrophic. Commander Kimmel attempted to bring the submarine back to the surface to give his crew a chance to abandon ship. The ballast tanks were blown, and Robalo clawed her way upward through nearly 300 feet of water. She broke the surface, wallowing in the swell, taking on water faster than the pumps could handle. The forward escape trunk was opened. Men began emerging from the stricken submarine, but Kuretake was still there. The destroyer opened fire again. Japanese records recovered after the war documented the engagement. The destroyer's action report stated that after depth charging an American submarine, the vessel surfaced and was engaged with gunfire until it sank. Survivors in the water were observed. 4 were rescued for interrogation. The rest drowned or were killed by the gunfire. This was not a mine strike. This was a combat engagement that the Japanese documented and the American Navy chose to classify. The reason for the classification was simple. Admitting that Robalo had been on an intelligence mission would compromise operational security for similar missions ongoing throughout the Pacific. Admitting that the Japanese had successfully ambushed an American submarine would damage morale. And admitting that intelligence failures had led directly to the deaths of 80 men was a public relations nightmare the Navy did not need in the summer of 1944, when the war in the Pacific was reaching its climax. So the official story became a mine. Random, unavoidable, no one's fault. The documents found aboard the submarine added another layer to the story. The intelligence materials Robalo carried were supposed to be delivered to the resistance cell before the submarine took on the even more valuable documents the cell had obtained. The materials Robalo carried included code books the Allies wanted Filipino operatives to use for secure communications, maps showing where supplies could be safely cached, and rosters identifying Japanese sympathizers who should be avoided. But Robalo never completed the delivery. When the ambush occurred, these materials were still aboard, which meant the resistance cell never received them. And without secure communications, and without knowledge of who could be trusted, the entire network likely collapsed after the translator's arrest. The gold coins told their own story. Intelligence operatives behind enemy lines needed hard currency to buy information, to bribe officials, to pay for safe passage. Gold was universal. Gold could not be traced. The satchel of Portuguese escudos suggested the Allies were funding operations across Southeast Asia, using currency that would not immediately be identified as American. If an operative was caught with American dollars, it proved they were working for the United States. If they carried Portuguese gold, they could claim to be traitors, smugglers, anyone but Allied intelligence. The film canisters represented reconnaissance that resistance forces had conducted at enormous risk. Operatives had infiltrated Japanese installations, photographed defensive positions, and gathered intelligence that could save thousands of American lives during the invasion. But that intelligence never reached Allied commanders because the submarine carrying it was sunk. For 80 years, That intelligence sat on the bottom of the Philippine Sea. Historians wondered how the invasion could have been so costly, how Japanese defenses could have been so effective, how Allied planning could have failed to account for positions that had been photographed and documented. The answers were inside a submarine that everyone believed had struck a mine. Why it matters now? The discovery of Robalo and the truth about her final mission matters for reasons that extend far beyond correcting a historical footnote. This is not simply a story about one submarine that was lost. It is a window into how wars are fought in the shadows, how governments shape narratives when the truth becomes inconvenient, and how the men who die on classified missions are often buried twice, once in the ocean and once in the archives. The documents recovered from Robalo have been turned over to military historians and intelligence analysts. Some remain classified, even now, 80 years after they were sealed in waterproof containers and loaded aboard a submarine that was supposed to deliver them to Filipino resistance fighters. The Navy will not say what is in those documents. The Navy will not say why intelligence from 1944 still requires protection in 2025. But the materials that have been released reveal something that changes our understanding of how the Pacific War was actually fought. Operation Coral Garden was not an isolated mission. It was part of a network of intelligence operations throughout the occupied Philippines that was far more extensive than anyone outside classified circles understood. Dozens of submarines participated. They delivered supplies, weapons, radios, and currency to resistance cells operating behind Japanese lines. They extracted Allied operatives who had been working undercover for months or years. They retrieved documents taken from Japanese headquarters. They landed coast watchers who would spend the rest of the war hiding in jungles, radioing ship movements and troop deployments. This was not the submarine war the public knew about. The public knew about submarines sinking Japanese cargo ships and tankers. They knew about wolfpack tactics and convoy attacks. What they did not know was that submarines were also serving as intelligence platforms, conducting missions that had nothing to do with sinking enemy vessels, and everything to do with gathering information that could save lives during the coming invasion. Many of these missions succeeded, but when missions failed, the silence became permanent. Robalo was not the only submarine lost while conducting intelligence work. She was simply the first one whose wreck has been found with the evidence still aboard. Researchers are now re-examining the loss of several other submarines that were officially attributed to mines or unknown causes. USS Flyer was lost off Palawan in August 1944, just weeks after Robalo went down. The official cause was listed as a mine, but Flyer was operating in the same waters where Coral Garden missions were conducted. Her patrol orders, recently declassified, show a rendezvous scheduled with resistance forces on the same coastline where Robalo had been ambushed. 8 men survived. 78 died. The Navy concluded it was a mine, but the evidence now suggests otherwise. USS Growler was lost off Mindoro in November 1944. The official cause is listed as unknown. She was on her 11th war patrol with a veteran crew. She was never heard from again. Growler's patrol area overlapped with known intelligence rendezvous points. Her disappearance occurred during the period when Japanese forces were actively hunting American submarines supporting resistance operations. USS Albacore was lost in November 1944. The official cause is listed as a mine off the coast of Hokkaido, but Albacore's final patrol included orders that have only recently been declassified. She was directed to conduct reconnaissance of Japanese naval facilities. She was carrying specialized camera equipment and intelligence personnel. She radioed her position on October 28th. She was never heard from again. The official records list 52 American submarines lost in World War II. For 28 of those losses, the exact circumstances remain uncertain. Declared lost to enemy action. Presumed mined. Cause unknown. How many of those submarines had been sent on missions the Navy could never publicly acknowledge? And when those missions went wrong, how many truths were classified to protect operations that were still ongoing? Families of the men who died aboard Robalo finally have closure. They know now that their loved ones were not victims of random misfortune. They were targeted deliberately because of the mission they were attempting to complete. They died, carrying intelligence that could have saved thousands of lives during the invasion of the Philippines. Their sacrifice was not meaningless. It was simply hidden. The wreck site has been designated a war grave under international maritime law. No salvage operations will be permitted. The human remains discovered outside the submarine have been left in place. The Navy conducted a memorial ceremony in October 2024. Representatives from the families traveled to the site aboard USS Samson. A bronze plaque was lowered to the seabed, bearing the names of all 80 men lost aboard SS-273. The truth does not stay buried forever. Steel corrodes, but it does not vanish. Documents sealed in waterproof containers can survive for generations. And eventually, someone builds a robot that can swim down through 300 feet of darkness and bring back proof of what really happened. Robalo waited 80 years. The secrets she carried are only now reaching the surface. And somewhere else in the Pacific, on another patch of seabed, another submarine is waiting to reveal another truth that official reports tried to bury.